Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And my guest today is a resident of Princeton, Stephen Hiltner. Stephen is a writer, musician, naturalist, actor with degrees in botany and water quality. So there are a lot of things we can discuss, but today we're going to focus on what can we as individuals do to help the environment and to sustain and save our planet. So welcome.
Thank you.
Big subject, right?
Yes.
So you do a lot of writing and blogs and ideas, and I really appreciated it. And a lot of it was kind of what we can do in little small ways that most of us, I think most of us feel a little sense of powerlessness. So, I go to my, I do my recycling bin, and then I think, have I done this right? And how important is it? And what if I throw it in the wrong place? So what? So tell me, so what?
Well, I approach it as what one wants to do is realize that it's a huge problem and that we're very small, and we have minds. We want to think that we're very large and bright and smart, and so the little things seem like beneath us, but actually I'm very incremental in the way I do things, and so every little bit, if you start thinking about what you can do, there's all kinds of little things you can do, and actually some rather large things in your life that can make a difference, and just slowly you start moving towards reducing your negative impact, and that's, I think people have trouble dealing with guilt, carrying guilt because, we hear we're doing bad things to the earth, but my sense is I'm a very optimistic person, but I also look at what we're doing, and I'm horrified. But I know that I have limited control. So I do some things in my life. I try to change things
like
in the
what?
community. Well, okay. So, one thing I got, we're kept in the dark about a lot of things because the electricity comes into our houses. It's like an umbilical cord. We're still in the womb in some ways because all this energy is piped into our houses, whether it's natural gas or electricity. We're completely unaware of it. The furnace is very quiet. It just goes on and off. It's almost like reassuring because it's keeping us warm, and air conditioner, and then the water all comes in. So it's all effortless for us. And all the meters that are telling us how much we're consuming are on the outside of the house or in the basement where we can't see them. So we're kept completely in the dark about what our impact is.
We're living comfortable lives. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And unless you actually scrutinize your energy bill every month, which I haven't looked at mine in months, but you don't know. So one thing I got was an energy meter, a whole house energy meter for my house. So it's on the kitchen counter. No one else in the family looks at it, but I do. And it'll say how many kilowatt hours the house has used during the day.
How big or small a piece of equipment is this?
Well, this is an old one. It's about like that.
So it's not.
It's just like a little.
Terribly complicated.
No, and the new ones you can just look them up on your iPhone. It's all it's communicating with your iPhone. Oh, I think they could be anywhere from 100 to
Right.
250 or
but
something.
100 you could get one
Yeah.
and monitor.
Yeah.
So even if you're not doing it directly for the environment per se, like that's a nice thought and you're interested in that, you could also use it just to save money and make decisions, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a big part of this is that we spend a lot of money on energy, and that is a lot of money going to something negative. Little things. So what I learned from the whole house energy monitor is when the electric dryer kicked on, instead of like 200 watts, the house was suddenly using 3,200 watts. So that's an extra it was, maybe 7 times larger amount of energy just when the electric, dryer went on. So I thought, well, I could get racks. I could just get drying racks and use those. And, just have this kind of hand-mind motion of very calming kind of, it's sort of like washing dishes. You can think about things while your hands are doing stuff. And this is as ancient as as time, as we are. It goes way back to when we used to do small repetitive things and be thinking at the same time. And so just like hanging up the clothes on the rack, it takes maybe 10 minutes more, but I just make it part of my routine. And I save a lot of energy from that electric dryer, which I had no idea until I got a whole house energy monitor that was sucking 3,000 watts when it's on,
Wow. Okay, so another thing.
Well, clothing. I'd like to have a sustainability fashion show in which things like Patagonia, they have those wonderful light coats now that breathe really well, so you can wear them inside. You can just walk outside in the winter, and these things are warm enough, but you can also keep it on inside, and then you can knock down your thermostat like 5 or, you have to negotiate that with a family, of course, but just the clothing, long underwear that's really comfortable these days, very light. So you can take advantage of all these breakthroughs in clothing, which don't seem momentous, but there are little things you can do, and that you're comfortable, and you become less dependent on all that natural gas that's being burned in your furnace.
Right. All right. So on a larger scale, so I want to read something though that you wrote in one of you. I invite people to check out your blogs and the things that you write, because they're very diverse and well written and meaningful. So you said, in a strange world where helping to save the planet is completely optional. And then you talk about how we pretend that good people with good intentions, and most people are, couldn't possibly do harm. And besides, what could our little big town possibly contribute to solving environmental problems that are global in scope? So we do think it's optional, I think. I don't think people have a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And it's something to think about in the future. So what do you have to say about that to us, to wake us up?
Oh, well, the amazing thing is, Princeton is a very high-profile town. So it has an opportunity. Okay, so you think, well, this climate change should really be solved at the national and international level. Okay, so we're waiting. Oh, I guess they aren't doing it. So where else can we start? Well, we can start right here. You can start in your house. You can start by, trying to get things going in the community. It's been pretty tough here because I think people are very happy, very satisfied with their lives, and, they've worked hard and they deserve a good lifestyle, and they, but I go to lectures over at the university on climate change. So, and these are climate scientists, and they're constantly saying, this problem is huge. It's very urgent, and we have to do something now rather than later. And then you walk across Nassau Street, and it's like, well, everything's kind of pretty much the same as it was like 5 years ago. Maybe a few solar panels have gone up. I don't know. We have a chance to really show the world what you can do. And
so what would you suggest for Princeton?
Well, a long time ago, I tried to get from PSE&G, our power company, the data on how much energy does Princeton use, how much natural gas, and so forth. Interestingly, it turns out that to incinerate our sewage sludge, they were spending $1 million on natural gas in a year back before prices came down. But you don't even know about this.
Wow, sure.
How much that stuff, burning that stuff is. It seemed like one of the biggest draws of energy, and then the business district uses a big amount of energy. But then just getting around, everybody drives their kids to the school, and I think because I have daughters, I have to negotiate with them. I love driving them to school, but it's not such a great thing. They could walk, they could ride their bikes. And if there was some strong message coming from the superintendent or from the town council or some, that it makes a difference. All these little drives here and there make a difference, when I go out to Route 1, that would help us in the house make decisions. You know, just skew things a little bit towards walking, riding our bikes, and so now when I go out to Route 1, my thinking has evolved incrementally to the point where when I go out to Route 1, it's like, well, I have to have like 5 different things to do because that's like a big journey, you know.
Right.
Everything's relative, you know. So when I mostly ride my bike around town, and I thought about, am I going to ride my bike up here? Well, I'm a little late, and it looks like it might rain, but it's not raining, and maybe 5 minutes won't make a big difference. So I ended up riding my bike. But it's a matter of habit and just thinking about it. And I think if we had strong, you know, leadership from the top, that would bring, you know, it'd be trickled down. There'd be a lot of things that people would start doing in their lives that they've been thinking about doing.
Right.
But
I think I think you're right. I think it starts from the top, and again, it's really just consciousness raising. I mean, most people do care in some way. They would like to do better, but it's not kind of in the foreground of their lives. And I think that may be the place to start, is if you start with the town council and you start with promoting a level of awareness and educating, creating a level of awareness, because otherwise it's just kind of piecemeal. You did this article at some point about the flooring got flooded in the Princeton schools. So, you know, talk about that, because there was something about that after a while could have been prevented if there was forethought.
Yeah.
But it kind of, the mistake was repeated. So.
And that sort of thing drives me crazy, because if you can see what the, you know, for climate scientists, they must, I don't know how they keep from just tearing their hair out, because they know very clearly what's going to happen. You know, all the they don't know exactly what's going to happen, but they know all the possibilities, and it's all pointing in that direction. And yet they see the world just not reacting. And it was like that with so what happened is we converted a detention basin that's at the high school into a wetland. And it's a wonderful thing. There's frogs, crayfish, and like I planted all these native plants in there that are flourishing because there's lots of sunlight, lots of water. The sump pump from the high school pumps into this wetland. So it's very steady. It's like Old Faithful. Every 15 minutes the water kicks on. And so when you have a stable hydrology, you can get all these wonderful native plants to grow. So we had that going, and then there was this big flood. And it got into the school, and they had to replace the performing arts stage. The wooden stage got all kind of wrinkled from the flood, and they tried to blame it on all these plants in the detention basin. And and we looked at it. The environmental science teacher, we surveyed everything. We looked, and we were out there during the flood, and I saw that the water was not. It was coming in from the street because the architect for the new part of the high school hadn't gotten the heights correct, and so when you get a whole lot of water, the Walnut Street turns into a river and it flows towards the school, and so what we needed is an outlet to get the water on this river of Walnut Street to go into an area, a field away from the school.
Right.
So I told people, you know, it's not this wonderful little wetland we made. It's the lack. You know, we just have to like dig a trench, you know, so that the water has someplace to go. And they didn't react. And then 5 years later, you know, this past summer, I think it was July 31st or something, huge storm, very sudden, and boom, you know, and I was coming from the west, so I knew it was coming, and I drove right over to the school, and I saw the whole thing happen again, and they had to replace the stage again, and my daughter's in the choir, so they had to have their concert over at the middle school because the stage was.
So again, so if we look at that scenario, where could you have interrupted that? Because clearly, you saw that the problem was not resolved.
Yeah,
Nobody made a change.
right.
So how do you then mobilize?
Well, okay. So after the first time, I emailed the engineers at the town. I emailed the superintendent. I emailed the facilities director. You only have it's called personal horsepower. I kind of like that term. I heard it recently for
good.
for how much push you can give to any
Yes.
particular initiative. And so I did those things. Didn't get much of a response. I was happy just to prove that it wasn't the wetlands' fault.
Right. Did they blame the wetlands the second time around?
I think they tried. Some people tried, yeah. So it's hard to get people to see where water goes because
But it cost the township a lot of money, right?
I think they had to pay a 10,000. No, it's not the township. Schools are a completely different budget.
Okay.
So I think the school had to pay $10,000 in insurance.
Right.
But and insurance covered the rest. But they couldn't use the facility for
Right.
4 months or something. So.
And it is preventable.
And it is preventable, and it would have made a lovely wetland in the other place where the water should have gone.
Right. So have you given up this battle?
I actually yesterday I was thinking of emailing because they had a meeting. They didn't invite me because I'm not one of the stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
I just my daughter. I'm a parent. And I never found out what happened.
Also known as stakeholder.
Oh, actually, the water needed to go into Westminster.
Okay.
So in Westminster is completely up for grabs now. I don't know if they're going to sell it or what. So that must have put a kibosh
Right.
on changing things for the meantime.
Okay, so
But,
what else do you want from, again, so we give this example and somebody else can take up that fight or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is it, again, that people need to hear that kind of creates the impetus for some kind of action, some kind of change?
Well, I mean, it goes back to that something you read there, which is, and it's been a lot of evolution in my thinking to realize that, we try to think of, what really dominates the news is when somebody intentionally destroys something or kills somebody or that sort of thing. But the real danger to the world is just good people doing things that they aren't even aware of. So it's what we do unintentionally. I mean, we drive to pick up our friend at the train station or at the airport or something, and all the while we're adding to the CO2 that's up in the atmosphere, which is driving global warming. But we're doing a good deed. Right. It's family, or we're visiting grandmother or something, and it's all good stuff, running errands. But the what is it called? Collateral damage. It's a collateral damage that we don't mean that is really driving the world in a harmful direction. So when you realize that, you start feeling like, who's making me do this? Are we just are we just automatons who are being controlled by some terribly evil entity out in outer space that has decided to destroy our planet by using good people to do it?
Yeah.
And so then I think it changes your relationship to guilt, and it makes you feel like I'm being made to do this stuff. I mean, I could forgo visiting grandma, but why should I have to deal with this ambivalence? And so I think that's where people can start to get some sense of outrage at what we're being. We don't have a whole bunch of options to live a decent life, a normal life, and not do all this damage. I mean, I'm trying to trim down as much as possible incrementally, but why isn't there outrage at the people at the leaders, at the businesses? Technology, why isn't all that power being brought to bear so that we don't have to feel this terrible ambivalence and sense of foreboding?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's just education, making people aware, consciousness raising. But I think this whole concept of good people, basically good people. And for me, as you describe your lifestyle, it occurs to me like every day we make plans based on the weather, and we decide what we're going to wear, and based on train schedules, whatever. So we're daily making life plans.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the idea is just to start integrating that consciousness into it. So
Mm-hmm.
not only what am I going to wear, but asking yourself, is this the best way to get there? What is it that I could do today that would, leave a smaller footprint, even
Yeah.
just in tiny things? Maybe it's just
Right.
integrating it into our daily life, as you clearly have.
Yeah.
And I think the whole thing, there was something else that you wrote, but this idea of, on a national level, it's not going to happen on a national level if we haven't raised our own, questions. And you said something about the victims are distant in time and space. They lack names and faces. Some forms of environmental pollution are temporary in impact, but the climate change we feed is forever. What's missing is a deep sense of awareness and caring about the physical world that serves as a foundation for our lives.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
talk about how if this was a problem like racism, we would be more engaged.
Oh, yeah. What was that? I mean, I do think more. I mean, and this kind of it comes from my acting and writing climate change. I write climate. We have a climate cabaret, and we do comic climate sketches. But the whole idea of Earth as a character, and future people as a legal entity, which is totally they're unrepresented. The animals are unrepresented. The Earth is unrepresented. The Earth is totally taken for granted because it gives everything for free, and so things that are given for free have people discount as
Right.
So
We don't owe the earth anything.
Yeah, and so I do think of it as we raise our consciousness about how we treat people, people of different genders or races or whatever. How do we treat the earth? I mean, is the earth a character, also an entity out there that something along those lines.
Yeah. So what would you suggest, again, why aren't our leaders doing something? So what do individuals do in terms of having our leaders more mobilized?
Yeah, well, that's tough. I haven't cracked that one yet. I do think there's I feel like I have not reached out enough to the leaders. Do I really know who my legislator is? In Trenton, or have I really developed a relationship with these people and called them and told them what I feel? Because if you don't speak out, if you don't just communicate with these people, how are they supposed to know?
And it doesn't end up on their radar screen. Do you have children? Do you think their generation is more aware and going to be more involved? Now, I know your children are growing up in an environment where they're very conscious of this. But do you think that in the world at large, in schools or whatever, that their generation will be more concerned?
I don't know how many kids are taking environmental science in high school. That has had a big impact on my daughters. I mean, I have not actually taught them a lot about this is an oak tree or something.
Right.
They've just been around me. But in an environmental science class, they really learn about how like you mentioned, the physical aspects of the world. How does all that work? What is carbon dioxide? Where does it come from? And why is carbon underground? Why should we not be taking the carbon stored underground? It's stored there for a reason. We should not be pulling that oil and natural gas and coal out of the ground, because that is changing the whole prescription of that highly medicinal CO2 that's that's up in the air, protecting us, keeping the air just the right temperature. We're changing that whole prescription. It's like we're changing the drugs we take into our bodies. You know, it's very much, the Earth is very much like a body, and we are changing that whole chemistry. We're chemists, really. We should be walking around in white coats because we are changing the chemistry every time we step into a car. You know, so and we're fooling around with this stuff, and I think people need to understand the physical nature of, you know, just some sense of, and also learn from science the skepticism, because people are not skeptical of their own points of view. You know, you see this, they're supposedly climate skeptics, you know, I don't think the scientists really know what they're talking about, but, you know.
Where does that come from?
Has this person been skeptical about any of their points of view?
Right.
No, they're directing it all outwards. And you have to, you know, as a scientist, you have to be skeptical about what you think as well.
Yeah.
And that's a real important lesson that everybody really needs to learn.
You know, I think the thing that you just said about the idea of chemists changing the chemistry. And the scary piece is that if you take it in the world of medicine and prescriptions, people just don't really research the prescriptions they take or pay attention to them. So it's really kind of asking people to be responsible for all their choices. But I love the description of we are changing the chemistry of the planet, of our bodies, and you want to start paying attention to what you're doing. Stephen, we're at the end of our time, unfortunately, but I'm so happy you were here because I think people need to hear on an individual level what they can do, what they need to think about, just even to activate some inquiry or looking for next steps. So thank you.
Wow, thank you.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.